At what point do you run out of material? Is there a point? Is it possible to run out of joke material?
That's impossible.
I agree.
Look out the window and you can pick on a bush and start talking about it. I literally saw a plastic bag floating down the street driven by the wind, and did a bit about how that plastic bag, finally I got to see true freedom. And it was that plastic bag, on its way to a river or a stream or the stomach of a fish to live out its best life.
Welcome to Season 2 of the TheKnifeWife podcast. I'm Suz, here with my husband,
Bob Terzuola.
We're professional creatives and entrepreneurs who live, love, and work together. We share our stories to find ourselves in others. P.S. This podcast has little to do with knives. Hey, everybody. It's Suz and Bob
That's me.
Terzuola. And,
That's how you pronounce it. That's the right way
that's
of
the right
saying
way
it.
to pronounce it. But
Yeah.
I was thinking the other day, we hear Terzuola, we hear Terzuola.
Terzuola. Yeah,
We
right.
Terzuola, I heard the other day. I'm like, where did you get that?
I don't know.
And then it occurred to me, maybe we're pronouncing it wrong.
No.
Maybe they're right.
No, I don't think so. No, it's pronounced exactly the way it's spelled.
Okay.
Terzuola.
Okay, well, it's very musical.
Yeah.
There are some things I wanted to share. One is, I started this podcast for a break from toxic media because it's mounting more every day right now. And I need a break from that. I want somewhere where people can just listen to people, like sitting down and having a cup of coffee with somebody or a drink, whatever you like. And they are relaxed. They have a break from that. It's something they don't have to think about that other stuff. And I came across something called nicenews.com. And every day they send me an email with nice news and advertising, but really fun things, really things that, really interest me. A lot of arts things, but then inventions or good things that are happening to people. And I think the rest of the news is, gloom and doom. And I don't know. I'm too sensitive to handle it. And as we know, TikTok is back on. And so now we have to come up with the TikTok dance. Bob says no.
No, not me.
But I'll be on TikTok pretty soon as a comedian because my handlers are putting me on there. Today, we have somebody really who's new to my life or new to our life. But the moment I got the email from him, first of all, his name is Tony Calabrese, and I knew he was Italian, but my driver's ed teacher in high school that was his name. And I had a huge crush on him. So I was like, oh my God, he's alive. He's come back. Tony runs comedy classes at the National Comedy Theater. He's had a dry bar special. He is the gentleman of comedy. He's a clean comic. I highly recommend you watch his dry bar special. What I loved most about it was not only the jokes, but since I come from a wardrobe background, he wore a suit and tie, and he wore a tie bar. And not many guys wear tie bars. I just saw...
What is a tie bar?
A tie bar clips your tie to your shirt, and it keeps it from flopping around. It's a very handy thing.
Another reason why I hate ties. They flop around.
And I just saw Dave Chappelle did Saturday Night Live, and he was wearing a tie bar. And since Tony's special, I haven't seen a tie bar since. And I was like, maybe those are coming, because guys' ties move. And as a costumer, it drove us crazy on, somebody has a little bit of action or walking, the ties move. So let me introduce you to Tony Calabrese. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Hey, Bob. Hey, Sue. How you guys doing?
We're doing pretty good.
We're doing.
I want you to know half of my grandparents came from Calabria, so they're Calabrese also.
Yes.
My family's from Palermo and from northern Italy, from Brescia. So we're mixed.
Mine are too, yeah. But they know what they say about the Calabrese. Calabrese are testa duro, hard-headed.
Oh, that's definitely true.
Yeah. Not just me, Bob. And I have to say that, when I met Tony, it was like sort of being with my husband. He's very similar. He kind of looks like one of maybe Tony Soprano's guys. He's a big guy like Bob is. And when I sit behind him and he's talking to people, his hands, Tony, I don't know if you realize this, but you You do use your hands a lot. And so, I'm like watching traffic being directed in front of me. And I'm always smiling, and people are thinking, is she thinking these people are that funny? No, I'm watching Tony's hands. So, and I think you and Bob have a lot in common about like loving food. Like someone said they didn't like bread, and Bob said, "What are you, a communist? What do you mean you don't like
Exactly.
bread?" That's a cardinal sin.
Yeah.
I heard a comedian do a bit about going out to dinner, and he's Italian, and people not wanting bread, and he was so happy he could have the whole bread basket to himself.
Yeah.
I know. I just asked for an extra one.
There we go. There we go. You've had a long history of comedy, but you had a lot of history before that. Can you tell us a little bit or a bit about your background and how you got to comedy?
Sure. And that entire time I wore a tie bar, just so that you know.
Okay.
Just
That was with the
I've been
tie.
wearing my very first suit I ever had, and my father gave me my grandfather's tie bar, and I wore it for years, and I still have it, and I still wear it, and
Nice.
uh, it's just I don't know, it's habit now. I don't feel right without one.
Well, and you can work it, and you told me you used it for something when you were on stage, right?
Yeah, if I touched it, it would help me. It would remind me of certain things.
Mm,
So
okay.
I would use it as kind of a, if I try to straighten my shirt, shape my tie, I could touch that tie bar, and it helped me remember stuff. So,
Wow, I got to get a tie bar.
but yeah, I did not start out in stand up. Uh, I started out. My family owned an Italian restaurant for 41 years, and I grew up in the restaurant business, and I realized that that's working too hard. And
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
it's a 24-hour-a-day business. And one day, a friend of my family's, who happened to be the friend of a president of a local bank, said, "Why don't you get into banking?" Now, understand, I knew nothing about banking, nothing about any of it, but I didn't go to school for it, knew nothing about it. And the next day, I went to work for a bank. He made a phone call. Boom, I was hired the next day.
Wow.
I got there, and I've got long hair at this point. I had a opened Kiana shirt and like disco slacks, and
Ooh.
everybody else there was in a suit and tie. And I'm like, I am not in the right place. And they got me straightened out pretty quick, and I was in a suit and tie within 24 hours. But and I literally worked my way up through every single department, and eventually named assistant vice president, and then the official bank humorist of the bank. I wrote comedy speeches for
Ooh.
the president, and I did sketches, and I would MC bank events, and clandestinely I was doing stand up, but then nobody knew about it. I never advertised it at the bank. I would just, and I was just doing open mics. So I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did that for, God, worked for that one bank for 20 years. And then, through several mergers, I ended up at Peninsula Bank in San Diego. And then when we got bought by US Bank, I left and took over as the president and CEO of the combined health agencies in San Diego. And it was a nonprofit that raised money with the United Way through the United Way campaign. So I had a bunch of all the agencies in my agency were health agencies, and did that for 4 years. And then during that time, I opened a boxing gym. I
As
love
everyone
boxing, love
does.
the sport of boxing. And my wife worked there, and she would train women how to fight and do classes. And we used to go to the boxing matches in Las Vegas. And yeah, I loved it.
Well, that sounds like an obvious career move, actually, going
Yeah, doesn't it?
from chef to comedian to banker to boxing
Boxer, yes.
entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's a lot
And
like
then,
me. He's a serial guy. I've done many
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
And then while I was at the combined health agencies, a group came to me and asked me if I would take over for the president of a bank in Point Loma. I was not the original choice, but the gentleman who actually had worked for me in the past, who they had tagged to be president, had to step down. And they just came to me and said, "Do you want to take over as president?" And I said, "No, I don't want to go back into banking." And then they told me how much it paid, and I said, "Yeah, I can go back into banking."
Yeah, you can do that.
And
Sure.
of course, and I did that for several years. And then, they had another merger. And I said, "I'm done with this. I cannot do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore." They kept me around for a year. And then I left and said, "I want to do stand-up full time." But if I do that, I have to work clean. Clean is green in this business. And so I became basically a corporate comedian. And I only work clean, and I do that because you get paid and you
Right.
make a lot more money, especially at my age. I needed to find a niche. I'm not, some young kid that can go through all the comedy clubs. So I do conventions and, conferences, private corporate events, even family events. I did a 90th birthday in Las Vegas,
Mm.
this beautiful home with a, infinity pool overlooking the strip. And so that's what I do. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I used to, when I worked for advertising agencies, they always had, like, for the Christmas party, there was a skit or there was a musical or whatever. And I always wrote those and directed those, and they didn't have me sing because I can't sing. But
That's for sure.
but, and in probably every job I had working for somebody else, I was always in charge of entertainment and making people laugh. And I was interested to hear that about you. I never thought I was gonna do stand up or even, I don't know. It never occurred to me. Although one of my bosses at advertising agency did sign me up for a Second City workshop, which I had to try out for, and then I moved all the way up to through Second City.
Nice.
Yeah, he knew, but I didn't know. But I didn't have the guts then to stand up there by myself. But you were at a good age to start stand up. So then what you probably did is you had to go do open mics and stuff to practice, right? Because who do you practice on? Your family? They drive them nuts.
Yeah, that's kind of the road you have to take. You work your way up and even in a comedy club until, you can be considered, the best of group, which is usually the club's local comics that are what they consider the best of the area.
Hmm.
Well, up until COVID, I was doing one big show a year at the Comedy Store, and that died at COVID. And then I've done one since, but I've had, some health issues, and so I had to back off doing that.
Yeah.
I might do it again this year, hopefully. Yeah, you have to get on stage. There's no substitute for stage time, and you have to do it however you need to do it. So it's not just open mics at a club.
Hmm.
It's doing the little coffee shop gigs. Now every time you can grab stage. What we did though, eventually is four of us, we went to the comedy, at the time it was called the Greek Palace Restaurant, at Claremont Mesa Boulevard. And we went there and we talked them into doing a stand-up comedy night. And they had a stage there, an area. It wasn't a stage at the time. We put the riser in, and they did like belly dancing
Of course they
there.
did.
And so we put a riser in, and they already had a sound system, but so we started doing a show there, and then it morphed into 2 shows and 3 shows. And when we finally finished there, we were doing 7 shows a week. They were packed, and it was the height of the economy, and then everything went into the toilet, 08, 09, and
Yeah.
that kind of died down a little bit. But by that time, we'd been on stage 4,000 times and got a lot of experience doing that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so that's how I did it.
There must have been some, and you also drove to LA all the time, right?
Of course, you had to.
Yeah, I sort of getting to know some of the local comedians. I do. I go to a lot of
And
the.
that LA drives a bitch.
Oh yeah,
It's
oh yeah,
awful.
yeah. When I took care of a dying brother who had pancreatic cancer, and I had to drive him to Cedars all the time. And as we were driving, thank God for podcasts and books on tape. But I thought, I am paying penance for something I did bad in another life, because that drive is brutal. And I'm not a Californian, so I got my chops though. I can drive anywhere now. At first, I was really intimidated, but no more. So sometimes you do a good show, you do a bad show, you do a show you'll never forget. And I asked you about those.
God, there's been so many.
Can you pick one?
I mean, too many's a number. Probably the one that was the craziest was we had myself and 2 other comics had been booked to do a fundraiser for the Escondido Humane Society. Now, if you're from San Diego and you've been here a while, you remember that they had a fire there that burnt the place down
Mm,
umpteen years ago.
yeah.
And so this was a fundraiser to raise money for the Humane Society again. And yeah, I was all in. I couldn't wait to do this. I love
Mhm.
animals. I'm happy to do it. And it was at the Carlsbad Village Theater. We get there
Mm.
and they've got it's a movie theater. So there's a screen, and on the screen they're showing the fire. And They've got smoldering carcasses of animals laid out in the grass.
And you got to
People
do
are
comedy?
weeping. People are literally weeping. And this guy goes up, "Hey, let's have some stand-up comedy now."
Oh, no.
It was, oh, you're like, "Oh, Lord." How do you just jump into that?
Yeah.
And I was the host, and I got so flustered. I had to introduce the headliner, who I have known literally for at that point for 15 years. His name's Lamont Ferguson, and Lamont is a hilarious comic. He does a lot of cruise ships, been around now for, 30 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lamont Sanford." And I didn't even know I did it. And so I get off the stage and Lamont's just looking at me as he comes up. And and the green room is behind the screen. So you walk out and go back behind the screen.
Mm.
And the other comics looking at me like, "Did you just call him Lamont Sanford?" And I'm like, "No." And so then he picked on me for calling him that for about 15 minutes, and the audience was rolling. But,
Good.
trying to get him going when something like that happens is just,
Well, it looks like
we've
you had a
done
little
some weird
comedy angel on
shows.
your shoulder that had you say that so that, you could bring up he could bring
Oh,
up the room. Yeah.
Tony, you said he is an absolutely hilarious comic.
yes.
What makes a funny comic as opposed to somebody who's just can't light that fire, can't strike that spark? What
I think
quality do they
comedy
have?
is definitely subjective. So,
Mm-hmm.
some people love dirty comics, some people don't. I personally like the old style comics. The Rodney Dangerfields of the world. I love those guys.
You don't
And
get no respect.
yeah, and Buddy Hackett was one of my favorites. And
Oh,
Buddy could
yeah.
be filthy, but he was hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
But everything they said was real and came from the heart. I think
Mm-hmm.
comedians that get up there and talk from truth, to me, connect better with an audience rather than somebody today that's just trying to tell a joke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that works better today. And back in the old days, joke tellers, the one-liners, that was the style of comedy and people loved them. But that's changed quite a bit. There are very few just one-line comics anymore.
You're right.
I think, the really hilarious comics are the ones that connect with the audience through personal experience, and the audience feels like they're a part of it.
Yeah. Henny Youngman was one of my favorites.
So he was one of the best of the old school comics.
Yeah, he was. And another
know?
one was now Henny Youngman was the one-liner guy.
Oh, yeah.
And Myron Cohen, I don't know if you remember him. He goes way
Of
back.
course.
He was a storyteller, and he
Yes,
would
he
tell
was.
not really jokes, but he would tell stories, and you would just be captivated by the story, and then all of a sudden you get hit between the eyes with a punchline.
Right. Bob Newhart was one of my favorites.
Oh,
And Bob
yeah.
he was absolutely brilliantly funny. And he'd do these phone bits where he'd be having a conversation with himself
Right.
that was
Yeah.
just absolutely hilarious. And, he was one of the greatest. And people, they joke about Jack Benny, but Jack Benny could make people laugh without saying a word,
Right.
with just a look.
Mm-hmm.
And, Johnny Carson was the same way. Didn't have to say anything.
I
They could just
agree.
give that look and talk to the audience with their eyes.
Exactly. And, I got my start in comedy. I used to stay up late. My mother went to bed at 9, and my dad The Tonight Show would come on, and we would secretly have milkshakes and popcorn, which we had to clean up before she woke up because she was the food Gestapo, and we weren't allowed to eat that at night. But anyway, and I would watch The Tonight Show, and my favorite part of The Tonight Show, as my father's was the comedians. And so I saw all the old comedians. I mean, I was a 7-year-old staying up till it was a 2-hour show then, I think.
Uh-huh.
And I stayed up till the end because the comics were always on the end. And that's what I couldn't wait for. So I guess I don't know. If you used to watch comics on Johnny Carson, I certainly did. Jack Parr I watched, actually, his show. But that'll predate most of the people listening to a podcast. So some of, everybody has their bits, or I've seen comedians, that like musicians, they want to hear all the old songs, all the favorites. But with comedy, people seem to want to hear the new things. And what I've seen comedians do, and I don't know if you did this, but I hear them do their evergreen bits after they come out, like as an encore. And they'll say, I bet you want to hear this. And they'll tell one of their old jokes that everybody loves them for. Are there any jokes people love you for, or that you love that, are evergreen for you? Any bits or subjects?
Or stories?
Suze, I just thought of this bit that I probably haven't done in 20 years.
Ooh, let's hear it.
But it's one of the ones that people the comedians would laugh at me for doing it. And the audience, to this day, somebody will yell out, do the Jacques Cousteau bit. And I haven't done it in 20 years, but I used to think that I could impersonate Jacques Cousteau. And, the bit was that, Jacques Cousteau's, trying to talk to the fish. And he ends up talking to a great white shark. And it's just this crazy bit. I can't even remember how it went. It was so long.
Yeah.
But I used to imitate swimming through the water like a Frenchman. And God, I haven't done that bit in so long. But I think the ones that I do the most, of course, you have to talk about what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been married for 47 years in
God
a
bless
row.
you. In a row.
Yeah. To a saint. I don't know how in the heck she puts up with me, but and so I talk about being married. I mean, I've been married 47 years. I got kids. I've got grandkids. And so that's what I talk about. And some of the, trips that my wife and I would take. And there's always something funny about it because, Bob, I don't know about you, but when I go on vacation, I just want to relax. I don't want to do anything. And my wife she'd want to do stuff.
Yeah.
And no, I don't want to do anything. Yeah, she wants to say, I don't. Give me a Mai Tai, set me by the pool, and leave me alone. One of my bits, and I haven't done it since they had the fires because we love Maui, we love Lahaina. We've been there several times.
Mm-hmm.
It's where we went on our honeymoon, so it's heartbreaking to think about what happened there. And so I haven't done this bit on stage in a while, but since the fires, but it's we basically it's my wife wanting to do stuff in Maui. And she wants to go on the helicopter ride, and the stupid questions that they ask people, like how much do you weigh? And all the women are lying. My wife drops her weight by 50 pounds, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I'm doing the math. By the time they get to me, I weigh 500 pounds. It's that kind of thing.
We're going to be flying in a helicopter, damn it.
Exactly.
Let's get the actual number here.
And then, of course, the bike ride, which I don't know if you've ever done this, but
no,
they
not
bus
me.
you
Not
up
Bob.
they bus you up to the top of Haleakalaka, and then
Laka.
whatever it is. Then they drop you off with about 1,000 other people on bicycles.
And you got a bicycle down every laka?
Yeah, you get to
wow.
watch the sun come up, which is a huge thrill. And then
I'd
you
rather
have
watch
to
it go
bike back down
down.
from the volcano, and I don't know if you know this, but it's 37 miles, Bob. 37 miles.
Why would I know that?
He would never know that.
Why would I know? Why would I want to know that?
Yeah, Bob would say, I'll stay in the bus. See you at the bottom.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I'm a big guy, and, a guy my size, a 280-pound man, does not go down from the volcano at the same speed as a 110-pound woman.
No, you break the record.
Yeah, I got there 4 hours before she did. And,
Tony, let me ask you something. Can you fall asleep pretty much anywhere you want to on command?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. There you go. I don't know if that's an Italian trait or what, but I'm like that. And Susie is always just sleeping. You're napping. What are you doing?
Oh yeah, he falls asleep everywhere.
I don't get much sleep anyway, so I can take a nap in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Me too.
Oh yeah.
I'm a night owl, so I don't. I usually get my 20-minute nap sometime somewhere. Could be at Denny's. Who knows? I'm gonna nap.
Denny's,
Oh, no,
Bob's
not at
other favorite
no.
place.
Yeah, not at Denny's. I love Denny's pancakes. So I'm not going to nap on them.
I usually nap after I finish eating.
Okay.
Yes. Oh yes. And I think, I'm so tired. It must be the mattress. No.
Can I say something here? We have a mutual. When he's passed away, we had a mutual friend or acquaintance, Phil Lowbred, Bob.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And I just wanted to talk about, if you don't mind, Suze.
No, go ahead.
Phil was one of the nicest. If you knew him, he was one of the kindest, nicest, most gentle people on the planet. He was a collector of art knives, and had, he had commissioned the King Tut dagger that was a replica of the actual King Tut dagger made from, 32 ounces of gold. And it was really something. And he was a great guy.
By
And,
Buster Warensky, who made that.
right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Buster Winsky. And it was just such a small world when Suz was telling me about that when
Yeah.
I was having everybody introduce themselves. I'm like, boy, this is, talking about somebody, that's a very small community. And then to
Yeah.
have somebody like that
Well,
was
I'll tell
very
you,
awesome.
I think I mentioned to you, I'm not really sure, but I think I did, that when Buster Warensky finished that knife and Phil unveiled it, I guess you could say, presented it to the world, it was in a glass case at the Orlando Knife Makers Guild show. And I happened to be on the board of directors, and they always asked me to handle the microphone. So I did the microphone. I was the one who introduced that knife and Phil Lobred and Buster Orensky to the rest of the knife-making world. Nobody had known about it. They had kept it kind of secret. And when they unveiled it, that showroom, we had 125 tables. There was 25,000 square feet. And you could have heard a pin drop in that room. And people were just absolutely astounded at it.
I was very privileged to have held it. It's funny about that, something about that knife. When the King Tut exhibit was in Los Angeles, I rented a limousine. And first of all, I got train tickets, Amtrak tickets, for Phil and his grandson and myself. And we went up to the King Tut exhibit and we walked around. Phil was just in his, he was in his world there. And they had the actual King Tut dagger encased in glass, and it was hanging. And they had the sheath right below it,
Uh-huh.
kind of at an angle. They were one hand hanging on top of the other. And Phil was beside himself. He goes, "Oh my God, I never knew this. I never knew this." Well, his sheath had all of the engraving on the outside, but the actual dagger had engraving on the inside of the sheath as well. And so they had hammered it and then folded it over, so the engraving was still on the inside, while on Phil's it was flat.
Oh.
So that was just kind of a unique thing about that. But yeah, he was, I just wanted to bring that up. I just thought it's a small world.
It is a small world. And, when I was introducing myself and I was looking at you, I could see your face when I said, I'm a knife wife and, I work in a sausage fest and whatever. And I could see your face that, you knew something about knives. Nobody else in the room did. And it was a nice connection. And you being Italian. And I felt like, Bob was sort of sitting in front of me, although he knows very little about comedy. But it was really nice to make that connection. And
It was, yes.
in fact, Honest Fox Media, who's taken me under their wing, they also are in the knife world as well. So they knew I wasn't some nut. They knew who I was. I am a nut, but not a, a wacko, I guess. I don't know what to call it. All right, so where we go? We're going to go back to 47 years of marriage, going to Hawaii. When Bob and I go on vacation, he'll say to me, "Is this a forced march?"
I say in Italian, marcia forzata.
Yeah.
When we were in Venice for Bob, we were in Italy for Bob's 80th birthday. Was when I blew my knee out, and I had to sit for the first time. I'm not a very good sitter, but I really enjoyed it. And we sat on the Grand Canal in the St. Regis Hotel and this beautiful arched window, and had Wes Anderson like waiters waiting on us and bringing us little snacks and drinks. And I was able to sit there, and it was nice. So I had my first forced march vacation. I'm going to go back to the other when I can, though, because, I can't miss anything. So you guys, both of you, are what I call mega Italians. And that is, you both cook. And Tony, did you tell me that you do all the cooking in your house?
I do 100% of the cooking in my house, have since the day we got married.
Yeah,
Wow.
well, that's why she puts up with you, see.
Wow.
That is the only reason. She tells me it's to kill bugs and to cook, and that's pretty much it.
Oh, really? Well, that's very, very clear. That's good. How are you guys mega Italians in my mind? I'll give you a couple subjects. You have Bob's parents were not from Italy, but he lived in a household with 4 families and the grandparents and many generations of Italians.
I grew up with 7 cousins in the same house.
Right. And so about, I'll just bring up this subject. How about the Sunday sauce or gravy? Did you call it sauce or gravy, Tony?
It's funny. To my mother, it was sauce. To my father, it was gravy.
And what about you, Bob?
It was gravy.
It was gravy.
Yep.
Okay. All
See, I
right.
think Sicilians think of it as gravy, or Northern Italians don't. They
Yeah.
don't think of, first of all, they don't think of a red meat sauce as being particularly Italian. So
Right. Right. So, okay. And so what is your, you were talking, I know a little bit of this answer, but nobody else does. You were talking about making your own sauce. Tell me how you make your own sauce.
well, you get those whole tomatoes and you boil them and steam them, and you have to do everything from fresh. And I start out with sauteing onions and garlic, and you add all your spices, and I put cinnamon and clove and whole spice in a little bag
Oh.
and drop it in the sauce. And
You put onions in?
I saute onions first
Ooh.
until they're completely translucent and softened, and then I add garlic,
Mm-hmm.
and I let that saute all the way down until it's just this little kind of like soup of onion and garlic, you could call it. That's not even a soup. It's just the sauteed remains. And then I add my cooked tomatoes and some spices. And I like Italian sausage in mine.
Me too.
So I put Italian sausage in my sauce. Yeah, you just let it cook all day.
Yeah, except for the onions. I'm sorry, I just don't like the onions in the tomato sauce.
Yes. Well, there can be a lot of discussion with Italians about
there
food
was-
You
in
won't
the right
find
way.
it, Bob. You wouldn't find an onion in my sauce. They're cooked down so
Yeah,
much you would
yeah.
never. They literally melt. They're cut so thin, and they just melt into the sauce.
Okay.
Okay. Well, what I learned about being married to an Italian, and I'm going to do a bit about this, is that there's a lot of discussion about food. When you're eating it, they're talking about the next meal. Then they're talking about how they made that meal.
That's very true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My brother, who had never been around Italians, our friends from Italy came, and we went to the store, and my friend Libe looked at the ground meat, and it wasn't ground fine enough, so she brought it to the butcher, and I said to him, "Can you grind this again?" I said, "She's from Italy, and this really is kind of rough for her." And he said, sure. He was really nice, and I was surprised at Ralph's that they would do that, but they did. And she made the sauce, and they were in the kitchen cooking all day, right, Bob? All
All
day.
day,
And
all
my
day
brother
long.
All
came
day.
around dinner
That's
time.
true. That's pretty normal.
Yeah,
Yep,
And there was a lot of arguing about, he does it one way, she did it, and her husband does it one way, she does it another. I don't even stick my nose in. I'm like, if somebody's cooking for me, I'll eat whatever you make. And so my brother came and he said, they've been in the kitchen all day. And he was from Newport Beach, so he didn't know anything about cooking. His wife never cooked a thing in her life, and they always went out to eat. And so, and then we were sitting down, and they were talking more about what they were going to eat or make the next day. And my brother at one point said to me, "Is this all they talk about?" I said, "Pretty much." Yep. And I find it endearing and delicious, and that somebody else is thinking about the food besides me. Is that my responsibility? So I love that.
Can I ask what your favorite dish is, Bob?
Yeah.
One of my favorites is sausage and peppers.
Okay.
But I kind of don't make that very often. Susie doesn't like the sausages too much.
And can I say that we were in the store the other day, and I'm going away this weekend.
Oh, yeah, she's
So
going.
Bob says, "I got to get peppers to make sausage and peppers when you're gone." It's, only Italian would think of, "Oh, how's your plane going to be on time, or where are you staying?" No. What am I going to eat while she's gone?
What's the menu?
Yeah, I would have done the same thing.
Exactly. I got the menu planned.
Right.
Sausage and peppers I really like a lot. And I've been making meatballs. I haven't been eating too much pasta lately, but I've been doing the tomato sauce with meatballs. Usually with meatballs, I like to do the pork and the beef together, but we're holding back on pork. So I've been doing ground turkey and beef, and they've been coming out okay. Not
Yeah,
quite
I've
as
done
good as
that, but
pork.
it's not the same.
It's not quite the same, though.
I've been trying to be a little healthier there, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, and I have high cholesterol no matter what I do. So, and I just had a bunch
know.
of scans, and they said,
I
"You're
know
going to
the
have a
feeling.
stroke one day." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, no more pork."
2 quick dessert stories. When we were at the St. Regis in Venice one evening, we had after dinner we went into, I guess it was kind of like the bar place where you could just order coffee and drinks and look out on the Grand Canal. And I told the waiter, I said, "I'd like to get some cannolis." And he looked at me, this was like a very high class hotel. He said, "We don't have cannolis here."
Well,
He said
we're not
cannoli
from the
is.
South.
He
That's
said
why.
that. Yeah, they make those in the South, and
Yeah.
it was like, it was like chitlins and greens. We don't have that in this hotel. I said, well,
Yeah,
I'd
it's
really
night and
like to
day
get
from
them.
northern Italy to the south.
Yeah. So I said, I'd really like to get some cannolis. And so he went in the back and he came back and he said, our chef is from Calabria and he knows how to make cannolis and he's going to have them for you tomorrow. And they did. And he made just one plate of cannolis for me the next day, and just for me.
That's hilarious.
And then one other quick story. We were having dinner at a restaurant here, Amalfi, I think it was. Amalfi restaurant, Italian restaurant, very nice. And they had sfogliatelle on the menu. And I had never seen that on the menu before. You probably know what they are. They look like clams, and they're wrapped in very thin dough.
Tell Tony why they're so important to you from when you grew up.
When anybody living in the big house with 4 families and 7 cousins, whenever anybody bought a car, they would have to bring home a box of sfogliatelle, and that was to be shared with the whole house. Okay,
I love that story.
so that was important. We were sitting in the restaurant, and I told the waiter, I said, "So you have sfogliatelle?" And he looked at me and he said, "You're from Brooklyn, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, well, how do you know?" He said, "Only the people from Brooklyn call it sfogliatelle instead of sfogliatelle."
He did, and they haven't had it lately. Have you ever been to Amalfi up in San Marcos? It's on the lake.
No,
Tony?
but I've heard everybody tells me about it. I think you told me about it. I'd never been there.
Yeah, well,
Very nice restaurant. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I'll try it out.
okay. It's okay. They make their own pasta, and their pasta is great. And I'm not big on, even if it's bronze cut, I'm not a big pasta lover these days, but I do love someone who made me some homemade noodles. So I'm up for that. And their bolognese is pretty good.
Store-bought pastas, it's just awful. It's just people don't know that, when you have a fresh made pasta versus the dry pasta, there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There just is.
When our friends came, the one that Susan was telling you about, our friends came from Italy,
From Milan.
from Milan. They brought 4 pounds of pasta from Italy in their suitcases because they said you can't get good pasta here, and it had to be cut in bronze. It had to be squeezed through a bronze die. Couldn't be a steel die. It couldn't be a plastic die. It had to be bronze. And I said, "Why is that?" And they said, "We don't know, but we think it holds the sauce better."
Yeah. But if you know Italians, they're really particular about food. I mean,
That's
crazy
how particular they were. They brought the pasta from Italy because
in their suitcase. But then they left it here, and they always buy so much stuff here that, they were happy to have the room in their suitcase to go home with all the stuff they buy.
Anyway, Tony, I wanted to ask you a question about comedy.
Yeah, sure, Bob.
Going back to comedy, just for a moment here. It's something I've been thinking about since Susan got into it. And that is the future of comedy. It seems like it's blossoming all over the place. There are more and more specials on Netflix and comedy clubs, and there's the Don't Tell comedy here in San Marcos on Fridays and so forth. It seems to be really growing. What about the future in terms of telling jokes the same as somebody else? I mean, you get... at what point do you run out of material? Is there a point? Is it possible to run out of joke material?
No,
Or-
that's impossible.
I agree.
You can look. All you have to do is just look out the window, and you can pick on a bush and start talking about it. I literally saw a plastic bag floating down the street, driven by the wind, and did a bit about how that plastic bag. Finally, I got to see true freedom, and it was that plastic bag, on its way to a river or a stream or the stomach of a fish to live out its best life. I mean, you can talk about anything. You just got to keep your mind open and just go with it. There is challenges today. We live in a very politically correct society now. There is a woke culture. On both sides, by the way. It's not just the left.
Yeah. Yeah.
The right gets extremely offended by anything remotely, bashing Trump or that side, and they go crazy. So, we have to try and tread that line, or, depending on the kind of comic you are, you dive full bore into it and let the chips, fall where they may. So
Like Don
there's
Rickles.
never going to be a lack of anything to talk about. It's just what
Right.
you feel you can do and get away with.
Okay.
Yeah, just like the other day when I went to that store, and Tony knows this too, I went to a storyteller's free workshop, and I was taking copious notes. It had nothing to do with learning how to tell a story. It was the people and the comedy in the place.
Yeah.
So I've decided for how I'm going to mine for some new bits and some original bits is I'm going to sign up for a bunch of different kinds of workshops and see what I can get.
Let me ask the second part of the question. And that is, okay, you brought up the plastic bag flying down the street in the wind. Okay. What makes it funny? Why is something like that what makes people laugh at that when you tell that bit?
Well, pulling out the absurdity of the whole thing. And everybody's, we hate plastic bags now. But I can remember when we went to plastic bags because we couldn't have paper bags anymore because we were chopping down the forest to make
Right.
paper bags.
Right.
So then we went to plastic bags to save the forest. And now the plastic bags are evil. And so, who knows? We may have the same issues with the plastic. And now it's the recycled bags, and they're made out of God knows what, and chemicals that they use to recycle them. There'll always be something. But to me, in that particular instance of the plastic bag they're banned. You can't get them. But here was this one lone bag floating down with the breeze, all on his own. He wasn't banned. He was living his best life. And he was going to retire somewhere in a stream or a field, like I said, or, the belly of a whale, who knows, to live out his best life. And it was just being a bit sarcastic, a bit absurd, and pointing out, just how crazy some of the stuff that we have today that we deal with. And, it's not one of those bits that you're going to be remembered for. It's just something that in the moment I thought was funny. And it also comes down to how you tell it and your attitude and your mannerisms and your facial expressions. And, you can't just tell it. You have to live it when you're telling a story like that.
Yeah, and I think what makes it funny is he's living his best life.
He's living his best life. Yes.
I mean, I'm sitting
He's
here and our
free.
engineer is nodding, and he was smiling when you first said that.
Yeah,
So,
he's not stuffed with fruit or kale or something like that. He's out there on his own,
thank God Bob would never want to be stuffed with kale.
Yeah.
So we're almost at the end of our time, which I'm sorry about, but I
Wow, flew
wanted
by.
it did fly by, which I think we'll have to do. We'll have to have you on again.
Let's have him again. I got a bunch more questions about
I'm
comedy.
sorry I went off track there a little bit with Phil, but
That's all right.
Not at all.
That's
Not
all
at
right.
all.
For our knife lovers, that will make them happy. And my podcast, 77, I think, percent of the people who listen are men. And I've always been a tomboy. I've always hung out with the guys.
And the name of it is TheKnifeWife. I mean,
yeah, there you go.
I want to tell people where they can find you.
Well, I've been teaching for 14 years. I teach at the National Comedy Theater in San Diego and at the Point Loma Actors Theater through the organization actlivenow.com. My classes they're always sold out, never stop, every Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And you can go to any one of their websites, nationalcomedytheater.com or actlivenow.com. You can go to my website, TonyCalabrese.com. You can email me how you doing at TonyCalabrese.com.
I love your email.
Yeah, so that's pretty much how you go to my Dry Bar special.
Dry Bar, that you can get it on YouTube if you don't subscribe to Dry Bar, but you can watch it
Yeah,
on
it's
YouTube.
out there. It's been out there for a while. So
I know. Go see the tie clip, everybody. And much, much more. Anyway, well, thanks for being with us.
you're welcome.
We're going to have you on again because I can tell Bob he has so many more questions for you. And we only have an hour, and we ran late today. So thanks a lot, Tony. Thanks for being with us.
You're very welcome. You take care, Bob.
great talking to you. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. And everybody, thanks for joining us. Follow us, like us, leave us comments. I think next time we record, we will answer some of your questions because I've got a lot of questions and a lot of nice comments, which I sometimes feel is just like patting ourselves on the back. So I'm a little allergic to that. But we'll be with you next time. And, if you're not laughing, you're not living, right, Bob?
Yep.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please share this with a friend and subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Support our efforts through Patreon at TheKnifeWife, and for all Terzuola goodness, go to Terzuola.net. And remember, if you're not laughing, you're not living. Comments and questions can be made on Instagram at The Knifewife Podcast or our Facebook group, The Knifewife Podcast. And if you're a couple who work together and would like to be on our podcast, tell us about yourself with an email at eccentricsuz.com or terzuola.net.